Zambola, I think I must say that I should welcome Dawai Kudroen because we have not just one guest but two. In fact, I'd like to welcome both of you. Firstly, I have Dr. Gopakumar K. Krishna Thampi, who is an expert in social accountability. Let me read out your CV. You have a tall and lavish CV here. I'll just briefly read out. An expert in social accountability, governance, anti-corruption, designing and implementing large-scale governance programs, impact assessment and non-profit management. Is that it? Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. And I have Mr. Srin Chopal, who is the Senior Program Officer from the Department of Local Governance. Thank you so much for being here. Let me start by asking Doctor, some of the best international practices that you have come across. If you could share your experience here, why do we have to go for, or why do we need social accountability?
Thank you, first of all, for having me here. Let me first preface the response to your question by saying that social accountability is an expression of the fact that we as citizens, we normally exercise accountability during elections, and we seldom ask the question what happens between elections. So social accountability is a mechanism, is an approach which looks at the period between two elections. Okay. And trying to deepen democracy through a series of constructive engagement and bringing citizens' voice, opinions and priorities into mainstream political discourse and dialogue. In terms of best practices, there are numerous cases. It's originated mostly in Asia and South America, and then we have Africa now coming out with so many examples, very pioneering, enabling examples of people's voice being organized in a meaningful way and dialoguing and engaging the state and the government institutions for improving their lives and livelihoods. Some of the best practices in social accountability are the famous case of participatory budgeting in Brazil, where budgets which used to be created within the confines of a legislature or a parliament is opened up for public participation in a direct way, so that people can express their needs and priorities directly without any filters or intermediaries.
How is that being done?
It is done through a very organized way in getting citizen groups and representatives, and through a very constructive, very structured series of discussions and deliberations, coming out with a set of priorities which reflect the grassroots reality of what people needs. So this is budgeting bottom up. Okay. Rather than the conventional way of, doing the budget, assuming that this would be the needs and priorities. This is a way of directly, going back to the roots and addressing the concerns there. Similarly, you have very interesting tools like the Citizen Report Card, which originally came from the city of Bangalore in India, whereby instead of protesting or complaining, there is this particular tool or instrument allows citizen feedback to get into process of governance, again in a very focused, objective fashion. The idea behind most of this tool is that democracy should not end up as protest in the street. Okay. That there has to be mechanisms, there has to be space, there has to be institutional approaches through which very constructively criticism, very constructively opinions and experience of people can be assessed and can be incorporated into public policy making. Okay. Okay. So this is in brief, a quick response to your good question.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Srin Chopal, in our context, what happens between the elections? Are electorates so silent that they have once elected their representatives and they remain silent till the next election is ready?
Thank you very much, Dawa. I think in essence, the concept of social accountability, as I understand, is not just for the elections. It's not just a mechanism to apply during the elections. Yes, election is one way of holding the government accountable, but then if we just use this social accountability space for the purpose of elections, then this is, the space is not very effective. So what happens is we have a series of the rules of procedures, the rules of law, and people should have the space the willingness of the space to use these rules of procedure to hold this government accountable. And it's not just during the elections.
Okay, the question that I asked was very much about what happens between the elections in our context, meaning do we have people or have our people understood the fact that the state institutions or the particular agencies should be held accountable for whatever actions or plans they execute? Is that happening?
This is, honestly, to be honest, this is one of the challenges that we're facing right now. And the concept of democracy, people are not really aware of the real essence and the concept of democracy. And because of the context, because of the way that we have gone into democracy, because of the process involved in making our country democratic. And the reason I'm saying is our country has become democratic not because people want it. In essence, the clamor, the demand to have democracy should be voiced out from the people. But fortunately, here in our context, it is our king, whose royal wisdom was that, it is not the one man which is who's to be looking after the affairs of the people, but the understanding of the people is that democracy is the gift of the king, and then they look upon the king to tell us what to do. And fortunately, recently we have His Majesty the King explaining that democracy is not a gift from the throne, and this is the responsibility given to the people to voice out, to fulfill the needs of the people, to fulfill the demand expressed to those service providers.
Okay. Citizens' engagement is very important when you talk about social accountability. Mm-hmm. Now, when you engage citizens, there are again lots of limitations attached to it, challenges.
Right.
Now, what are some of the serious challenges that you would see? At least in our context, the challenge that we see is people still have some sort of reservations to raise their own concerns.
Right.
That is evident. In your context?
Well, I think in many contexts where I worked, this is a natural starting point. That you start in a stage where people are reluctant to talk, not necessarily because of fear, because there is no practice of using that space to voice one's opinion publicly or make a strong clamor as he used, or a demand for change. But what we have found out is that when after the transition, when democratic institutions get settled and there is a deepening process happening, this response will come from the citizenry, provided there is a catalyst, there is an interlocutor who works with the mass in educating them. Civic education goes hand in hand with social accountability. You cannot have rights by forgetting responsibilities. So part of the challenge in social accountability is managing this fine balance between empowering people with their rights and entitlements, also educating them about their roles and responsibilities. Because the danger otherwise is you raise expectations of the people by an overemphasis on rights and entitlements. And then, as you have seen during the last 6 months, what happened in Turkey, what happened in Indonesia, it spills to the street. It becomes a kind of a mob violence, and that becomes the language of democracy. So the inherent risk, whenever you mobilize people, educate them, talk to them about the rights and entitlement, is that parallelly you need to teach civic values and citizenship education to balance that. Because of modern spread of media, I think what happens in one corner of the world ignites a response in another part almost instantaneously. So we live in a much more networked and connected universe. So images in one part has a repercussion on a very, very different social context. So that has to be kept in mind while building social accountability as a tool for deepening democracy.
Dr. Thampi, empowering citizens is very important.
Absolutely.
Considering this fact, how do you do it? Should we leave it to the CSOs or media to empower citizens? How do you do it? What would be the best way to empower citizens?
Well, like I said, the starting point would be first mobilizing, that you have to get public opinion together, you have to get groups together So that is the role where we believe, I don't want to use the word CSOs, it's community-based organizations, not necessarily the formal registered entities that we normally talk about as CSOs. If you look at the history of some of the success stories in social accountability, many of them emerged from social movements. It's not even registered formal NGOs or CSOs. But the secret behind those success was, there was a collective effort. It is not individual grievances being aired, but a collectivity of expressions which come together. So that collectivization is very important for social accountability. The next question is, when you collectivize, what is the next stage that you do? That is where the civic education component comes in. Educating them about the rights and responsibilities and balancing the same and doing things small. Most of the social accountability initiatives which succeeded started very local. It did not start at the national level. It started in small villages, demonstrated the power of organized citizen feedback in improving livelihoods. And that message was then taken upstream. I believe that's the route which we hope will happen in Bhutan. Not in starting in a very grandiose scale, but doing things manageable, showing the power of demonstration power of what can happen when citizens organize, get empowered, get educated, and start expressing their desire to make a change. And how is the state responding to that? It is this dynamics which will determine the path of social accountability any social context.
Okay. Mr. Sringchapa, what are some of your observations here in Bhutan? Is it happening? Social accountability. Now, one of the ways to promote social accountability definitely is through transparency. Is it happening in our society?
Well, I would be little hesitant to say that social accountability is really taking place in our country, but I don't mean to say that we don't have the space for mechanisms in place for social accountability. And if I make a mention of the empowerment, like you asked Dr. Thampi, I think we derive our empowerment of the people mainly from all the rules of law and the acts, different rules of procedures that we have. For example, the constitutions. Our constitution provides citizens full of empowerments, the right to life and liberty and freedom of speech and information. And similarly, we have the local government acts to relate it to the local governments. And we have a structure, very good structure in place where the local government officers, the service providers at the local level are required to conduct things in a very transparent way, in a very responsive way. But the issue really with us is the understanding of the users, which are the citizens. And as I said, because of their capacity, because of the sensitization, they are not able to really use the space provided to them. And of course, this is because we have been living in a very beautiful culture of being a welfare state, and we are so much used to being fed and being told what to do. And the main issue right here is the citizens look at the service providers, those officials at the government level, as the benefactor, service providers, and those government officials who are supposed to be responsible to provide services, they look at the citizens as the beneficiaries, so not really as the right holders.
And they themselves as the welfare officers.
Yes. So this is really, one of the main challenges that we're facing. But gradually, I think we are doing a lot of education and sensitization through different programs.
Do you think this will change sooner than later, after all the expertise that you have gained from Dr. Thampi's presentation, or is being here in the country as a resource person?
I think we're already seeing a lot of changes. If we talk about the elections that we had in 2008 and the elections we had recently in 2013, so many changes that we have already experienced, and we have so many examples of people asking the government through different mechanisms and forms, for example, the media.
Okay, Dr. Thampi, talking about accountability now, you can put into places the proper checks and balances through different ways and means. And there are also institutions placed to monitor performances of different institutions or stakeholders. keeping this aside, the role that a media, or rather social media, plays to check, or rather to create some sort of accountability, how healthy is that? Because in our context, I'm not very sure about how things operate or how things progress in other countries, but at least in our context, what happens is we have so many social media operators who use all kinds of pseudonyms and then often tend to be malicious in trying to get their views across the board, or in trying to make themselves heard.
Right.
They end up being so malicious. How healthy is this practice?
Well, certainly I think it's not just happening here. I mean, all over the globe, there is a kind of a very vocal concern about the role social media plays, especially hiding under the cloak of anonymity. The type of messages, the type of images that you put in. But one should also ask the question, why is the social media able to exercise this right? And part of the reason I believe is that if formal spaces exist, automatically a large amount will get deflected into that. Sometimes social media becomes the only conduit whereby you can critique or criticize, and that space is obviously misused or abused. So one of the challenge is to build resilient formal spaces within the social structures, so that you don't have to resort to anonymity to express your views and opinion. There is a formal organized mechanism through which you can do that. Because shutting down the social media is not going to solve the problem. You have to counter it by creating a resilient countervailing power, a position, using the formal spaces that you have. So strengthening that is the only solution to this, because the ubiquitous nature of social media is very difficult to shut. You can assume any account and start your social media campaigning under different pseudonyms. So that's not going to help. You have to create a counterbalance whereby the distinction is seen. And instead of anonymous response, if you have a formal, organized way in which people can, without fear, come forward and express and engage with the state, I think it will balance out in the future. That's a strong belief that I have.
Okay. Mr. Singh Chopal, now we have already talked about the voting rights of our citizens, and it's their empowerment or their rights and responsibilities just do not end by electing their representatives after 5 years. But it actually begins from there, to see whether things are happening as desired by the constituents themselves or not. And to do that, there are certain things that people need to know, not just the response, not just the freedom or rights, but they also have series of responsibilities in their hands. Do you think this is going to play a major role, especially with our new government promising financial and administrative power to the local governments? Do you think this will change that?
Yes, why not?
The attitude, the mindset of our people. Actually.
Yes, why not? Definitely. As I said, the only thing we need to do is to build the capacity of the people so that they break the barrier. I mean, it's all about the attitude, the way they think about. And yes, because when they voted for a particular member of the parliament, they voted not just out of anything, but by listening to the pledges. And if in the course of, in between the 5 years, and if they really see that some pledges are not being fulfilled, why not? There should be a space, and we can,
not just wait for the next election to vote that person out,
yes,
but rather come up with corrective measures or whatever you can, raise your voice and make changes within 5 years itself.
Yes, because we have a space, political space given by our act. We have the Constitution, we have the Election Act, we have the Local Government Act, where the people are given the empowerment, where people are empowered to come forward. And we have already seen within the, in the last few days, with reference to the current government's about 32 pledges within 100 days, and people are already making noise, and they are just asking the government, when is it coming? And some days have already passed, and I'm sure the current government is doing something to ensure that all the pledges, as they have promised, are fulfilled within the given time.
Okay. Dr. Thampi, now social accountability is promoted through citizens raising their voices for their own concerns and for their own needs.
Right.
But again, the repercussions would be that if not everyone is engaged in doing so, one or two might be considered black sheep, and he or she might get blacklisted and thereby face some repercussions. Do you see that fear happening in places that you have been to?
I think you're referring to the question of free riders, that you
Exactly.
you designate the duty of raising the voice to somebody else, but you get the benefit out of that. Again, it depends on the way that you mobilize constituencies. The places where social accountability has succeeded, the primary reason is because you are connecting a concept, very abstract concept like accountability, to your immediate life. The right to food, right to work, right to live, right to education. So it is no longer abstract when you do that. And that's part of the education process in social accountability. So when that right become a collective right, you get over this problem of people standing back and waiting for somebody else to bell the cat and then get the benefit out of it. So that is why starting at the grassroots, not depending on an elite thing to move this discourse from top to bottom, but to generate that momentum at the cutting edge is so critical to sustain social accountability in the long run.
Okay. Mr. Singh, now at least in our context, we have seen so many instances where people would believe that, okay, everyone's responsibility is not my responsibility. As long as I am safe, fine. Why should I talk for others? Why should I raise my voice for others? Until my shin hits a rock, I'll not feel the pain. This kind of attitude we have in our people. So if this remains, then social accountability is going to take some time to happen here.
Yes, I would agree with you. But as I said, it all depends on our mindset. I think the challenge is, how do we change our attitude? How do we change the way we think? How do we break the barrier? I mean, we are no more in the pre-democratic democratic time, and because the reason why we are empowered with all these rules of procedure is to come forward and demand, express your views and express your demand and ensure that you get it, you as a right holder, and not as a users, but as somebody that has a right to get the service.
Okay, now the issue is not so much about the urban folks, but we are talking about the rural folks who would want to know their rights, who would want to know their responsibilities, and also lots of developmental activities are taking place in the rural areas rather than urban areas. So keeping this in mind, Department of Local Governance should be coming up with lots of sensitization programs to let citizens in the rural areas know their rights and responsibilities, and then empower them, and to ensure that they have all the rights and responsibilities enshrined in the Constitution for them. Will that happen from your side, from the department side?
Yes, the Department of Local Government is already doing so many things to build the capacity of the people in understanding the rights given to them. And for instance, after we had the Local Government Act in 2009, and unfortunately we couldn't have these local government rules and regulations passed until 2012. So what we have done is we have gone around all 20 districts, and we have invited the local government officials, civil servants, and the Goshinyenshi, that we see, the senior citizens. So what we have done is we have done a sensitization program for them. We have read out the rules and regulations. We have told them what is their rights, what they can do, what they cannot do, and we will continue to do many other programs that will build the capacity of the citizens.
Yes, Dr. Thampi, talking about financial and administrative power or empowerment to the grassroots level, mainly to the local government level.
Right.
If this is happening, then you will need to engage lots of people or lots of rural folks to join hands and raise their own concerns.
That's right.
But in our context, what happens is, for many people, they would prioritize their daily household chores more than discussing about plans and policies that would be beneficial for them in the long run, because they wouldn't actually see the immediate benefit. So how do you change this mindset then?
Well, if you look at some of the, again, examples from other context, many places started in this disabling environment. People are not interested, they have retreated to their own shells and their individual lives. That is where, again, the strategy of mobilization and education comes to play. When you highlight that, this is not an individual issue, this is an issue which affects not your generation, but the life of your children and future generations. There is much at stake if you neglect this opportunity. The advantage I see in Bhutan is that the systems and the institutions and the laws and the spirit, they are in place. What is needed to take advantage of this is the practice of democracy. Compared to many other countries in the region, some of the best laws and the whole concept of the gross national happiness, which kind of liberates the country from the whole commercial attitude of looking at the economy as the driving force. Those are all a kind of advantage for the system. What is now needed is deepening the democratic practice, taking advantage of the spaces that are provided, the institutions that are opened up. That's where the challenge lies. And I think one of the lessons, if I can quote from other context, is to be patient with the change. Now, change takes time. It takes effort. If we are not patient with that change, that is when it becomes a street protest. And it's that risk that we have to always consciously avoid in the future.
Only thing we need to do is to be patient. Change is going to take place, but are we on right track for now? Do you see that happening?
Well, we need to be patient because, as Thampi is saying, the change will take some time. But it doesn't mean that we have to be pessimistic. And I see that again, because of our cultural context, to some extent, to a greater extent, because we have been just 5-6 years into the democracy, and people are. I see people as pessimists. They still look at the state as the benefactor, as everything would come from the state, and they are the users.
Okay. Dr. Thampi, now talking about people showing their own concerns for their own needs,
Right.
raising their voices for their own needs. But again, the fear is, now when you empower citizens to raise their concerns for their own needs, there are some people who might again abuse those rights.
Right.
In the process, might render the local government functionaries or even the elected representatives defunct or dysfunctional, because they would be saying things that are not appropriate at all.
Right.
Just believing that they have certain rights to express their concerns. So in dangers like this,
Right.
what would be your advice?
I think, see, the way social accountability as a concept gets into practice is through various tools, what we call the tools of engagement. What the tools do is to take these individual elements out and distinguish what we call noise from voice. What you're saying is an uncontrolled explosion of expression sometimes, which destabilizes things, which is called noise. What social accountability tools do is to give a coherence to these expressions and thought. And the other aspect of social accountability, which we miss talking about, is that it believes in the concept of constructive engagement. That contestation is not the route to make a change. That you have to engage with different stakeholders. And social accountability believes that change is a collective expression. It doesn't necessarily reside with the CSOs or with the people. Every stakeholder has an equal role in that. So it is this wider ambit of social accountability, this larger recognition of the existence of other stakeholders, the respect for other stakeholders. We believe this provides the pathway to kind of neutralize some of the dangers that you talk about, getting hijacked in one particular direction, or getting dominated by one particular view. So this buffers actually insulate the approach from this kind of extremities. But it can happen. It is a risk, and one has to be wary and conscious about it.
Okay. Mr. Singh Chopal, now to look at social accountability really being implemented or happening in our society, the first thing that we would see is to change the attitude of our service providers, as you mentioned, rather than service users. Because in most of the cases, we have seen so many of our service providers having the attitude that service users are there because of us.
Yes.
And we are doing a great favor to the service users because we are here. This kind of attitude is not helping people promote social accountability. Now, will this ever change? Because you even see these things happening today. And lots of civil servants, lots of government officials misusing and abusing powers and abusing the resources that they have in hand, abusing the time they are supposed to spend in the office or spend elsewhere. So with this kind of things happening here.
To some extent, yes. And again, this is because we look at the service providers not as service providers, but we look at them as power holders. In essence, those government officials are not power holders. They are with certain responsibilities to provide certain services to the people, and to change this attitude with the civil service.
They are the real servants,
yes,
as they used to
yes,
promise during the election campaign.
Yes, to change this attitude of the civil servants, as you're saying, the demand should come from the people. The people should point out that you are accountable to us. Do
you think our people will take more than 1 or 2 decades more to raise their concerns or raise their voice to do that?
Well,
or will they still remain to be happy with whatever is provided for them?
Well, it depends. It's up to the people, because from our side, we are doing a lot of capacity building programs. We are implementing a lot of sensitization advocacy programs, as I told you. But we can't go to the people and make them voice and demand. And again, that might lead to some of the activities like protest, which I would not call the good mechanism and good strategy of social accountability. So that will only create disharmony in the society. That's why we have a certain rules of procedure given to the public, empowering the people how to demand.
Okay, Dr. Thampi, finally,
sure.
I do have other questions, but I think with not much time left, I think I'll skip those questions, but rather from your side, within your short stay here in Bhutan, you must have observed whatever must be happening within and around you, and also during the workshop or during the seminar, you must have interacted with so many Bhutanese participants.
Right.
What are some of your observations, and what are some of the key areas that we need to be cognizant or we need to be aware of, so that social accountability is definitely going to happen in Bhutan sooner than later?
Well, personally, I feel a lot of optimism during the last few days of interactions and very, very intense discussions that we had during the course of the workshop. Part of the optimism comes from the fact that the smallness of the context compared to some of the other countries where I work, the diversity and the largeness of the area, the context itself is so overwhelming. Here, I think being small, being more or less homogeneous, and with the right, at least a large part of the systems and institutions in place, I think the basic enabling conditions are here. What you now need is a champion to come forward, a champion who would come and take the initiative and take the first step. Now, where is that champion going to come? It's too early to predict, but that is the potential. It all depends on the first step that you take. A little bit of risk taking. Many places where social accountability started, it started not with the grand success, but I think there has to be a very conscious attempt to change the status quo and to make the first step, take the first step forward. That's where I see the challenge.
Thank you, sir. Final words, Mr. Singh Chawla. Who is going to be the champion for the rural communities? Is it going to be your department?
I would see this department as a mediator, not in terms of solving the problems, but as I said, we have a better role in building the capacity of the people, and at the same time, we must also implement programs that would change the attitude of the service providers, the government officials, because we are government officials, but at the same time, we are also citizens, and the champions should be the people themselves, and we also say that there should be a strong role played by civil society organizations, which, of course, in our case, as I said, they're weak. doesn't mean we don't have civil society organizations, but as of now, the extent, the degree of role the civil societies are playing are not really satisfactory. And but the challenge is the media. We see our media dying already, and these are some of the challenges.
Okay, so media need to be really vibrant.
Yes, and we make media vibrant with support from the government, because we have a very unique context where media is so much dependent on the government for sustenance, and we have already seen an instance where one of the media has to close because I mean they couldn't sustain in terms of the functioning as a real media, as the CEO of the media was saying.
Okay, thank you so much. Everyone is a champion in his or her own ways, is how we can put it. Thank you so much, Mr. Sring Chopal and Dr.
Pleasure,
Thampi, for
privilege
being
to be
here.
here.
With this, we come to the end of Dawai Kudroen. Thank you so much for watching Dawai Kudroen. Until next Wednesday, where we bring in another edition of Dawai Kudroen, it's time to say good night and Tashin Dalila.